I found out the truth on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day that should have meant nothing. My wife's phone lit up on the counter, buzzing with messages she clearly thought she'd deleted. I wasn't even snooping, I just saw my name in a thread I was never meant to read. Her best friend had been cheating on her husband for months, and my wife had been covering for her with lies that used my schedule, my kindness, my reputation as the smoke screen. And when her friend's husband started getting suspicious, she didn't hesitate, she blamed me. Said she thought I might be the one having an affair. My own family believed her over me. Within weeks, I was painted as the unfaithful one, shoved out of my own home, losing everything piece by piece. The humiliation was so thick I could taste it. That was the day I realized something inside me had snapped, quietly, cleanly. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just made a promise to myself. One day, they will choke on the truth they buried me with. Before we continue the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I love seeing where my stories reach around the world. I remember the silence more than anything, that strange, heavy quiet that hangs in the air before a storm breaks. I walked into the house expecting the usual, her half smile, the smell of coffee, the TV murmuring in the background. Instead, she was sitting at the edge of the couch, hands clenched between her knees, eyes already rehearsed. She didn't even look up when I closed the door. "Can we talk?" she said, but it wasn't a question. It was a sentence. I didn't know it yet, but she'd already made her decision. Already told her parents. Already told mine. Already rewritten the last 10 years of our marriage into some twisted story where I was the villain. She didn't warm up to it, she just dropped the accusation like a hammer. "I know about your affair." I laughed at first. Actually laughed. That stopped the moment she slid her phone across the table like evidence in a trial. Screenshots I'd never seen, messages I'd never written, times and dates from nights when she told me her best friend needed her. She'd stitched a story out of nothing, and somehow it looked real. When I reached for her, she jerked back like I was contagious. "My mom's coming over," she whispered. "It's better if you leave before she gets here." Before she gets here. Not we. It was the smallest phrase, but it told me everything. She was already gone, already chose her side, already prepared to watch me fall alone. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and heard the lock click behind me, slower than usual, deliberate, final. That was the last moment my house still felt like it belonged to me. 2 days after she threw me out, I finally understood why the lie had landed so fast, so hard, and so clean. It had been prepared long before I ever saw it. Her best friend, Melissa, the one who used to raid our fridge and call me the stable one, had been cheating on her husband for months. I knew she was reckless, but I never imagined she'd drag me into her mess. Turns out, she didn't hesitate. When her husband started sniffing around, asking questions she couldn't talk her way out of, she panicked. And panic needs a scapegoat. That scapegoat was me. My wife had been helping her cover it up, feeding her excuses, reshaping timelines, using my late work nights as her alibi. And when Melissa's husband finally cornered her with proof, she threw out the wildest, most desperate accusation, that she'd seen messages between me and Melissa. That maybe I was the one sneaking around. What shocked me wasn't Melissa's lie. She'd always lived on the edge. What broke me was that my wife didn't even blink before backing her up. She told her parents. She told mine. She told our mutual friends. And somehow, without a single real piece of evidence, it became the truth. One woman's secret metastasized into my reputation, collapsing overnight. The worst part? I wasn't even angry yet. I was still in that numb, disoriented phase where you think if you just explain yourself calmly, people will listen. That decency still counts for something. That the people who know you wouldn't trade you in for a convenient lie. But they did. All of them. And while I was scrambling to understand what the hell had just happened to my life, they were already preparing the next step, something far worse than rumors or whispers. They were preparing to erase me entirely. The official accusation didn't come from my wife. It didn't even come from Melissa. It came from her husband, a man I'd grilled steaks with, fixed a leaky sink for, helped move furniture when his back went out. He showed up at my temporary rental with a look I'd never seen on him before. Not anger. Not confusion. Something worse, certainty. He handed me a printed stack of screenshots. The same fake messages my wife had shown me, except this time they were highlighted, annotated, and neatly organized like a police file. "I'm filing for divorce," he said, voice shaking. "And I'm naming you." I blinked at him. "You're what?" "You were sleeping with her," he insisted. "You ruined my marriage." I felt something inside me sag, like a beam cracking under weight. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was going to court. He wasn't looking for truth. He was looking for someone to bleed so he wouldn't have to face his own humiliation. And my wife, my own wife, had been feeding him every detail he needed. Dates. Times. Suspicious behaviors. Emotional theories. All fabricated. All polished. All delivered with the credibility of a loyal spouse just trying to stay honest. My parents called that night. My mother's voice was thin, trembling. "Just tell us the truth," she whispered. I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. "Your wife wouldn't lie about something this serious." That sentence shattered something I didn't know could break. By the end of the week, I had an eviction notice from my landlords, due to domestic unrest. A request for my resignation from my job pending investigation. And a subpoena with my name printed in bold, pulled letters. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to say, "This doesn't sound like him." But no one did. I wasn't a husband anymore. I wasn't a friend. I wasn't even a son. I was a rumor with legs. I walked into the courtroom believing, stupidly, that the truth would matter. That facts would cut through the lies like a blade. But the moment I saw the way people looked at me, I understood. The verdict had been written long before I ever took a seat. Melissa sat beside her husband, mascara smudged just enough to look traumatized. My wife hovered protectively at her shoulder, whispering encouragement like she was holding up a grieving sister instead of a serial liar. Neither of them looked at me. Not once. My lawyer, a public defender assigned because I'd already burned through my savings trying to stay afloat, leaned toward me and whispered, "They're sympathetic. Don't expect much." He didn't even pretend to fight. The prosecutor painted me as a manipulative adulterer who'd taken advantage of a vulnerable married woman. He spoke with the confidence of someone who already knew the judge liked his version better. Every detail was twisted, every normal interaction reframed as something sinister. My wife testified with a steady voice, listing changes in my behavior she'd apparently been tracking for months. She even cried at the exact right moment, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. When it was my turn to speak, I told the truth. Plain, simple, unpolished. The judge barely looked at me. In the end, they didn't send me to prison for cheating. They found a technicality. A charge tied to electronic misconduct, based on the forged messages. A charge that sounded just serious enough for the court to flex without bothering to dig deeper. 6 months. 6 months for something I didn't do, handed down with the casual tone of someone ordering lunch. My wife didn't flinch. Melissa smirked. My parents didn't come to the sentencing. As I was escorted out in handcuffs, I looked back at the people who had once been my whole world. Not one of them met my eyes. That was the moment I realized the truth didn't matter here. But revenge would. And revenge, that I could control. Jail isn't loud the way people imagine. It's the opposite, a dull, suffocating quiet that settles into your bones. Days bleed into each other. Nights stretch too long. You start counting time by the way the light hits the wall instead of the clock. For the first week, I barely spoke. I ate what they handed me, slept on the slab they called a bed, and kept my back to the wall. I wasn't scared, I was ashamed. Not of what they accused me of, but of how easily everyone I loved had let me disappear. The turning point came from a place I didn't expect. One afternoon during lunch, an older man with silver hair and a faded tattoo on his wrist sat across from me. He looked like someone who'd seen too much and survived it anyway. He slid his tray a little closer and said, "You've got that look." "What look?" I muttered. "The look of a man who still expects someone to save him." I didn't respond. He didn't need me to. "My name's Carter," he said. "And no one's coming. You save yourself, or you stay broken." Over the next weeks, he talked, and I listened. Not about crime or toughness, but about rebuilding. Discipline. Skills. He'd been a carpenter before life went sideways. Now he used the prison workshop to keep his sanity, sanding down scraps of wood until they were smooth as river stones. "Pain's just fuel," he told me once, handing me a piece of sandpaper. "You decide what you burn it on." So I learned. Slowly. Repetitively. Every day in that workshop, I shaped something, anything, with my hands. It was the first time since the lies started that I felt even a sliver of control. 6 months went by like a long exhale. And when they finally handed me my release papers, Carter gave me a firm nod. "You're walking out a different man," he said. "Make them regret ever betting against you." I promised him I would. And this time, it wasn't a vow born of anger, it was a blueprint. Getting out felt nothing like freedom. The air was colder, sharper. People moved around me like I was something they weren't supposed to touch. I walked out with a trash bag holding everything I owned, a pair of worn shoes, some paperwork, and a wooden block I'd sanded until my fingerprints were practically carved into it. I had no home to return to, no job waiting, no family with open arms. So I headed to the only place that didn't feel hostile, a small diner 2 blocks from the bus station. I sat in the corner, still trying to remember how to exist outside concrete walls and metal doors. That's where I met her. The waitress didn't hover, didn't stare, didn't pretend she didn't recognize the face she'd probably seen on the local news months earlier. She just refilled my coffee and asked, quietly, "Rough day?" I almost laughed. "You have no idea." She shrugged like it was the most normal thing in the world. Everyone has a story they haven't told yet. Her name was Jenna. Late 30s, tired eyes, sleeves rolled up like she'd been fighting her way through life for years. She didn't push, didn't pry. But she brought me an extra plate of food the kitchen messed up, even though I knew they hadn't. It was the first kindness I'd felt in months, and it cracked something open in me, not enough to spill everything, but enough to breathe. When I mentioned I was looking for work, she nodded toward the back door. "Owner's looking for help with repairs. Old building, lots of problems. You look like someone who knows how to fix things." I almost told her I didn't. But then I remembered Carter's rough hands guiding mine over sandpaper, the rhythm of shaping something broken into something better. "I can learn," I said. "Good," she replied. "Everyone starts there." That tiny moment, her not turning away, not flinching, not treating me like I was stained, became the hinge my entire life began to turn on. I didn't know it then, but Jenna would become the one constant in a world that had thrown me out like trash. And thanks to her, I finally had a place to begin rebuilding the man I was going to become, the man who would one day bring the truth crashing down on the people who buried me. Working at the diner wasn't glamorous. Half the time it felt like the building was held together with tape and stubbornness. The floors creaked, the wiring buzzed, and every pipe had its own personality. But for the first time in a long time, the work was mine. My hands, my pace, my choice. Jenna introduced me to the owner, a gruff, heavy-set man named Alvarez who didn't smile much but didn't judge either. He looked me up and down, asked if I could fix a leaking sink, and when I admitted I didn't know how, he just grunted. "Then you'll learn. Tools are in the back. Don't break anything important." So I learned. What started as patchwork repairs slowly became bigger jobs, rewiring a light, replacing panels, restoring the warped wood along the baseboards. The skills Carter had started teaching me in that cold workshop suddenly became the foundation of something real. I found a rhythm, quiet, methodical, almost meditative. There was no judgment in the hammer, no accusation in the wrench. Just cause and effect. Effort and result. Word spread. Someone down the street needed shelves built. A nearby store needed their front door rehung. Before long, people were slipping me small jobs, paying in cash, grateful for someone who showed up on time and didn't overcharge. Jenna kept encouraging me, sliding coffee across the counter during breaks, nudging me to take jobs I didn't think I was ready for. "You're good at this," she said every time I doubted myself. And somehow hearing it from someone who owed me nothing, someone who hadn't known me before the lies, meant more than any apology from my family ever could. Month by month, I built a reputation. A quiet one, but solid. Reliable. Professional. I rented a tiny studio, filled it with tools instead of furniture, and worked late into the nights shaping wood until everything else faded into grain and texture. I wasn't fixing a diner anymore. I was rebuilding myself, one board, one nail, one steady breath at a time. And without even realizing it, I was becoming someone dangerous to the people who thought I'd stay broken forever. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of quiet, ordinary day that doesn't warn you it's about to change everything. I was sanding down a set of custom cabinet doors for a client when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I ignored those, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Is this? Are you the guy who used to live on Rosemont Lane?" A man asked, voice stiff, like saying my name tasted bitter. "Yes," I said carefully. "This is Melissa's husband." I froze. I hadn't heard his voice since the day he shoved those forged screenshots into my hands. For a moment, I thought he'd called to gloat. Or worse, drag me back into whatever disaster he'd built from lies. But his next words were small, quieter than I expected. I think something's wrong." That sentence hit harder than any accusation ever had. He explained slowly, haltingly, that Melissa had slipped. Not once. Not in some dramatic confession. Just a small, stupid mistake. She'd reused part of a fake message format in a real argument. A line he remembered. A line he suddenly realized didn't match the original lie she told. He'd confronted her. She panicked. And panic makes liars sloppy. She changed her story 3 times, he whispered. 3. I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel it, the weight of what they'd done to me. But he kept talking, as if the truth itself was clawing its way up his throat. I don't know what's real anymore, he said. But I don't think it was you. Not an apology. Not even close. But it was the first fracture, the tiny crack that appears before glass shatters. He ended the call without asking how I'd been, without acknowledging the 6 months I'd spent locked away, without even pretending to care about the wreckage of my life. But I didn't need his remorse. I didn't need forgiveness. All I needed was the truth slipping out, finally, inevitably. Because once a lie starts leaking, it never stops. It spreads. It corrodes. It destroys from the inside. And I knew, with absolute clarity, that this was only the beginning. The moment Melissa's husband hung up, something shifted inside me, not anger, not relief. Something colder. Focused. A blade finally finding its edge. For months, I'd rebuilt myself quietly, anonymously, keeping my head down while they lived comfortably inside the lie that ruined me. But now the truth had cracked open, even just a little, and I knew exactly what pressure to apply to make the whole structure collapse. I didn't go to their house. I didn't shout. I didn't make threats. I went to a lawyer. Not the overworked public defender who barely remembered my name, a real attorney. The kind who looked at the documents I kept, the inconsistencies I'd started collecting, the phone records I'd saved out of sheer paranoia, and said, "They did this to you deliberately." He outlined the planned civil suit, defamation, malicious prosecution, damages for wrongful imprisonment, emotional distress, and financial loss. A legal avalanche. He said I had enough to bury them. But I didn't file anything yet. Not immediately. I wanted them to see me first. So I walked into the cafe where my wife worked part-time. She was talking with another waitress, laughing like her life hadn't been built on the bones of mine. When she noticed me, the color drained from her face so fast it looked like someone had wiped it away. She stepped back, bumping into the counter. "What are you doing here?" Her voice shook. "Good. I didn't raise mine. I didn't have to." "Melissa's husband called me," I said quietly. "He's asking questions now. Real ones." Her hands trembled. Her throat worked like she had words but couldn't form them. "I know what you did," I continued. "All of it." A plate slipped from her coworker's hand and shattered on the floor. My wife didn't even blink. She was staring at me the way people stare at a shadow they suddenly realized is a person. For the first time since she'd lied about me, since she'd sat in a courtroom pretending to be the wounded spouse, she looked afraid. And it was honest fear. Raw. Human. "Whatever you think," she started. "It's already too late," I said. "The truth is coming. And I'm not stopping it this time." I walked out and left her standing there, shaking. Not yelling. Not threatening. Just the quiet promise she'd never be safe from her own lies again. And that terrified her more than anything I could have said. Once fear settles into a liar's bones, they start making mistakes. Big ones. Within a week of seeing me, my wife tried to get ahead of whatever she thought I was planning. She contacted Melissa, then her parents, then mine, scrambling to stitch the lie tighter, patch the holes, rewrite their stories. But the truth doesn't stay buried when someone finally starts digging. My attorney subpoenaed everything: phone records, message logs, cloud backups, even deleted data Melissa thought had vanished forever. Piece by piece, their entire scheme surfaced. The forged screenshots. The coordinated statements. The voice messages between them discussing keeping the story consistent. All of it. When they were served the lawsuit, thick, heavy envelopes dropped into their trembling hands. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Their panic was delivered by registered mail. Melissa cracked first. She tried to revise her statement, then re-revise it, then blame everyone except herself. In the process, she admitted enough contradictions to sink a ship. Her husband filed for divorce again, this time with a real reason. My wife lasted longer, clinging to the story like it was a life raft. But the evidence was too overwhelming, too precise. Weeks later, my attorney and I sat across from her and her legal team in a conference room that felt smaller by the minute. She couldn't look at me. "We are offering a full admission of wrongdoing," her lawyer said, voice stiff. "And financial settlement for damages." I didn't respond. I let him list the numbers, more than I'd earned in the last decade, combined. Enough to buy back every year they'd taken from me. Enough to start a life that was truly mine. "And a written public apology," he added. "Signed by both women." I raised an eyebrow. "Published everywhere," my lawyer clarified. "Not hidden." My wife flinched like the words physically hit her. But it didn't end there. A few weeks later, the statements went live. Their names attached. Their lies exposed. Their reputations, the ones they tried to protect by destroying mine, burned publicly, permanently. And me. I didn't gloat. I didn't confront them. I didn't need the theatrics. I walked into Jenna's diner that evening, sat in my usual booth, and let the silence settle inside me, not the suffocating kind from prison, but the clean kind. The kind that follows a storm. "You look lighter," Jenna said softly. "I am." The world hadn't given me justice. I had carved it out myself, splinter by splinter, truth by truth, until the people who buried me were forced to choke on the dirt they'd shoveled. They lost everything they took from me, and I got something better than revenge. I got my life back.